Let's talk about local government for a second. The Sydney Morning Herald is reporting that misbehaving councillors would face fines, suspensions or disqualification from public office under a proposed suite of reforms aimed at streamlining accountability and instilling transparency in local government. So basically what they're going to do, Jason, is they're going to come up with a simplified code of conduct. Now that sounds great, but I was amazed.
Let's guess, a one-pager?
Well, it'll be 2 pages. But wait,
good.
I was fascinated to read today the existing code of conduct for councillors in New South Wales. It runs to 100 pages.
Which is not bad, because I'd say overwhelmingly most of them can't read. We have a remarkable ruling class in this country, except in local government. When you realise you think you've got B graders in Canberra or in your state parliament, go have a look at your local council. This is pretty amazing. This will be weaponised, for sure it'll be weaponised. Yeah. If you want to look at the bitchiness of politics and its ugliness, you look at local government. They are disgraceful towards each other and throw dung at each other all the time. And most of the time, of course, you know, we're the financiers of these little games that go on with these people that spend time in there talking about the Gaza Strip and whatever, as opposed to the nature strip. I think it's kind of amusing. And you know what else is amusing? And I'm sorry to get personal on this, but most people should actually Google Ron Honig, who is the local government minister in New South Wales, and look at his local government career. A man who was not contested as a mayor and sometimes didn't even need to have elections because somehow they figured out a way of scaring all the other candidates away in the local government seat of Botany. It was pretty extraordinary to see that man is now the local government minister in New South Wales, because he knows the game better than anybody else. And when I say the game, I mean the game. It is extraordinary.
Yeah, well, you see local governments doing crazy things and you never really see local government ministers getting involved. Joe, I've got an idea I want to run past you, OK? So I've been thinking about this all day. I want your thoughts. They're saying they're going to have 3 tests for alleged misbehaviour. Conduct unbecoming, conduct that brings the council into disrepute, and conduct that is outside the norms that's expected. But I want to add 3 more code of conduct violations. Give me your thoughts. Trying to rewrite Australian history, taking positions on foreign affairs, and flying flags other than the Australian flag. They should be code of conduct breaches as well. What do you say?
Oh, look, I totally agree. I think local government's very important. I think one of the shames is that it often gets left out of the debate, but local government is responsible for steering local communities, roads, rates and rubbish. It's important that we have good people on local councils making these decisions, and a lot of the time I think it sometimes falls through the cracks. But one of the, I think, disturbing things is that there's this tendency to focus on things other than the bread and butter issues. So things like the date of Australia Day, things like what's going on in the Middle East in relation to Israel, in relation to Gaza. So, I don't think that should be the core business of local government. And I think it's a shame that too often we hear local government straying into these diversions when their job is critically important for the basic efficient functioning of our societies and for individual people.
Well, while we're talking about local government, it's a perfect segue into artificial intelligence. Joe, you reported today that Labor is immediately introducing voluntary AI safeguards as it looks at some different measures to mitigate the risks that come when using AI. Just quickly, what are the big risks for consumers now that so many businesses are using AI? And how would a voluntary code, as suggested by the government, mitigate those risks?
Well, look, I think the main thing, firstly, is that this is a voluntary code. So they've done another report. That will go out for consultation for at least another 4 weeks. And then the government will have to consider the regulatory response. So this is a very complicated issue. AI will affect all levels of our society and our economy, and it's going to require a pretty comprehensive regulatory response. So they're looking at whether there'll be a standalone AI Act or whether you have some sort of other approach to individual legislation where you're adapting individual regulations to adjust for this new revolution. But none of that's happening at the moment. There is a voluntary code of conduct that's being introduced. I think the issue is that Ed Husic needs to get his skates on, and we should have a plan. And I think it would be ideal if that plan was presented this side of the election.
Yeah, whenever they talk about, governments wanting to protect us from AI, all I can think of is the Biden administration appointing Kamala Harris to protect humanity from AI. God help us.
I'll go a step further. Karen. Karen.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, that'll be the the boss of the AI world, and God help Australia. There'll be levers being pulled everywhere about it. It's amazing how they want to get involved in everything, but about 5 years too late.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the UK, where the BBC are saying that 500 staff will lose their jobs over the next 2 years to help them with their bottom line. But it's not all bad news for the BBC. They can't afford to pay 500 staff who they're letting go, but they can afford to spend £800 million a year on diversity programs, the stuff that really matters. £80 million a year.
Sorry, did we say BBC or ABC? Because this sounds remarkable. It's just like you got the currencies.
Oh, it's the same all over the world with national broadcasters. Yeah. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the BBC eventually firing staff and just replacing them with newer, woker DEI hires instead?
Well, look, we had a similar thing that happened at the ABC when they got rid of Andrew Probyn and replaced him with, digital producers. I think one of the issues for mainstream media organisations today is that we do have to do more with less. There are more people tuning out of mainstream media, looking at other sources of media. But public broadcasters, compared at least to the private sector, are in a relatively luxurious position. And you'd think that if there are going to be cuts, if they're going to lay people off and journalists are going to be out of work, you'd at least think that they're managing their budgets effectively and not wasting it on diversity programs. So those are my thoughts on that.
Well, their diversity programs, Jason, are very important to them because they want 25% of all their staff to either be ethnic, disabled, or from a lower socio-economic part of town. Is that a good plan for building a news organisation?
Well, look, I can only relate the Australian experience. The removal of the, pale, stale and males out of the ABC, they did plenty of that, and they moved a lot of people on, and all that's happened is the organisation has gone to the shit. And the whole problem, I think, with the ABC at the moment is it's got too many people. I mean, it might have a lot of diversity, but it doesn't have a lot of integrity. And the diversity they always talk about, it's always about skin colour, or it's always about ethnicity or accents or whatever. It's never about diversity of views. And, I would think the British public probably would love to see its national broadcast, which, by the way, is vastly better than our national broadcast for this country and more popular and viewed. But I think they'd like to see it diverse in its attitude as opposed to just looking at things, because things are a little deeper than skin deep. And it's quite amusing to watch what we know doesn't work in Australia now go on in other parts of the world. And, God help the BBC, because it actually kind of matters to the world, the BBC, and it's tragic in a way that they're going to screw that one up too.
Yeah, it does. Jason and Joe, thanks for joining me tonight. Appreciate your time.